right, we are live. So welcome everyone to this week's call. We actually are having a town hall. So it's going to be about the PEP-60 ERA budget. So I know there's folks that has some thoughts and feedbacks and questions. So this is a place where we want to hopefully address all that today, and then hopefully get things up to vote later today. So we can probably just get going. Ben, feel free to take over and start the intro.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ming. Hi everyone. I'm going to share some slides now. Some people probably saw them on a previous call, so I am going to apologise up front if some of this is sort of ground that's already been covered. But yeah, the era budget is really like the end point on something that we've been building up to for a little while with the foundation. We wanted to make sure it was really clear what's sort of our shared DNA, which gave us a starting point for coming up with a thesis of basically what needs to be done. And then the big overarching question is always execution, how things get done, which is what the era and the budget are really about. So give me one moment to sort of share my screen and then sort of try through this sort of as quick as we can. So yeah, what I was talking about there is like just really trying to get us all in alignment around what it is we're doing, where we're going to focus our energy and time, and then scale that up. The thing that I took probably from the thesis, and maybe Jack can speak to this a little bit more, is that the competitive advantage is community. I think Pocket has always had a really strong community. The most important thing is that we're all working in the same direction and that we're building off each other. I think if we're able to do that, if we use our resources, both people and financial, in the right direction, we're going to get to where we need to get to. It's probably pretty tough some days, and you look at the price and think, fuck, but I actually think if we can focus on those fundamentals, which is the right people on the right stuff, is going to get us where we need to go. It's actually a pretty simple equation. So that's how we're thinking about it. But I think people probably have seen or should know that, frankly, like the decentralized project space has, in general, a lot of problems, and they tend to be fairly predictable. You introduce a DAO, it becomes a little bit of a honeypot. Yep. And it can actually start to sort of play out in these pretty predictable ways. Yeah, people think that it's their piggy bank to get money from. Yeah, people come up with their own ideas, which may or may not sort of get the organisation where it needs to get to. A lot of waste and bloat tends to exist. Big teams form, and then nobody wants to shut them down or change them or give them the feedback that they need, or we all just get distracted by a new proposal or topic, basically for no other reason than it was put into the forum. And this can play out in sort of all different types of governance dramas around who has what voting capacity or these types of questions. So we don't want to do that. It's pretty much that simple. We don't want to have a DAO which is sort of falling into these pretty predictable challenges. We want to actually address those up front so that our DAO can be a funnel for the best people to work on the best jobs, because that will drive the best outcomes. So how do we do it? Okay, well, the first thing that we've done is we've tried to create as much clarity around actually what our ambitions and priorities are. The ecosystem thesis sort of lays out this idea of BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. Yeah, there are a set of ambitions that we're working to, and these are not overnight ambitions. Yep, these are sort of big things that we're all responsible for. But I think if we look at like this piece here, it's like what I would call coherent. It's complete, I think if we focus on the 5 things that are sort of listed there as the ambitions, we're going to be moving in the right direction. It's not necessarily going to get us where we want to go, but it's going to push us significantly in the right direction. The important thing is that you just can't do it with one of them. You know, like we go out and we get like $1 billion of annual protocol revenue. That's going to help a lot. Yeah, but it's actually not sustainable if the culture and the governance is completely fucked. Yeah, good to have $1 billion of protocol revenue coming in, but if people can't access it on a DEX or we're not on Coinbase or Binance or whoever's getting sued today, it's probably not going to be like as meaningful as it could be. So this is what the ecosystem thesis from PNF set out, is like these broader ambitions, and below that is like this idea of keystone projects, things that we need to work on, as a starting point to get there. Like we all know we can't get $1 billion of annual protocol revenue, if it's all through one centralized portal with P&I. Yeah, we can't sort of have the institutional financial rails we need if we don't have an ERC20 token, which can give us access to the EVM ecosystems out there and liquidity that follows those, or we can't get ourselves listed on a tier 1 exchange. So the first step to avoid a lot of those challenges around DAOs is to have great clarity on what the priorities are. We don't have to agree on how we get there. We don't have to have the full critical path to get there. What we do need to do is we need to understand what are the absolutely fundamental building blocks that we're putting in place. And that's what PNF is trying to take on right now, this idea of keystone projects that start us on the path towards this sort of stuff. And then the thing that we need to do, and I think what the DAOs are generally worst at, is we need to put our resources behind it. A lot of DAOs have great mission statements or a set of things that they're trying to do in the world. It's all well and good, but unless you put your people and your capital behind that, it's not going to work out. So, once we've got these priorities, which we've shared and we hope people think are meaningful, we just need to align behind that. We need to put our people and our resources into those, and figure out as we go how we can maximize the return on investment on each of those. Okay. Now, the third component, is that we need to be looking at a meaningful time horizon, because I think changing strategy, or adapting to new information is very, very important, but it can be a massive distraction and lead to confusion. I think there's a sort of really meaningful point for us coming up, which is the launch of V1. And if we think of that as like our major catalyst event, what we should try and do is get ourselves together on a plan to get to that point. Go as far into that plan as humanly possible without having to come back and ask for more money, without having to have sub-debates over strategy, without coming up with the new set of priorities. Basically, what we want to do is we want to create this sort of event horizon, put us all in a capsule that are sort of working towards that, and just try and make it happen. We don't want to be coming up for a proposal to get $3,000 to do this small thing because one, it's a huge inhibitor on innovation to the community. And two, it's like an MEV bot for the mind. It really does distract us from what we need to be doing, which is executing and not spending all day in the forum. So when we put it all together, what we come up with is like this idea of an era, which is basically, we're in an era now, which is pre this V1 launch. We've got a set of ambitions, that we're working towards. There's some projects we absolutely must have done, and there's a whole heap of people in the community that can drive towards these ambitions side by side with these key projects. So when we come to the idea of the era budget, what we're trying to do is to create clarity that capital that those resources are going to be there, and that we're not sort of in this this constant churn of trying to figure out what it is we're trying to do and where's the money to pay for it. So as P&F, we realise that we have a really critical role to deliver these keystone projects, and that we need to operate with a significant amount of transparency around the activity that we're undertaking. One, as the credibly neutral sort of steward of the entire project, and to set a foundation as role models for the ways that we can sort of work in the open. But two, to make sure that there's the highest level of accountability on the highest profile projects. So the ERA budget defines that budget for how we need to deliver those projects by basically making us accountable to a line item for each of those keystone activities. Okay, but side by side with that, the greatest driver, I think, of us getting to those ambitions, is going to be having the community contributing to those in all of the ways that we see, and frankly, the ways that we can't see, but community members can see, are going to sort of drive us forward. So a simple way to do that is this new mechanism that we're calling like the ERA allocation, which is basically the money coming in from emissions, the Dow take, as I call it, is 80% allocated towards these types of community contributions, so that if you have an idea for how we make the V1 the most successful protocol launch ever, or you have ideas around how we create the healthiest culture and governance, you can plug in the knowledge that those resources are there, and you're going to be supported to get going with it. Ways that you can actually plug in, are twofold. One is like this idea of open priorities, basically what I would call RFPs, which is as we decentralize, as new work becomes available that we all know needs to be done, a more transparent and open process sort of comes about so that the best people can be allocated to that work. Okay, we've started that just in the last 24 or 48 hours, with some of these first open priorities. Sometimes they will be a little bit more like the one Jack posted, which is like a referral bonus for people that bring great talent into the ecosystem that can be hired. Sometimes they're going to be more like an RFP for the mainnet snapshots, where different node runners or builders in our space can actually put forward a proposal or submission for how they're going to execute that work, and why them taking on this work in a decentralized project is the absolute best decision for us as a team. So that's one mechanism. And then the second one is the idea of sockets, which I think has been one term that probably gets people a little bit confused. Basically, they're small seed grants for people to just get started. If you need $1,000 to do something and it's going to help with our ambitions, you don't have to spend like a week writing a proposal and 2 weeks having people shit on the idea, and then hopefully you get the proposal passed. You just start. You show us that it's giving us ROI. If it is, you keep going. If it's not, it gets shut down, and we all move on. And this is why we sort of use the idea of sockets as things that sort of just plug in, they open and they close, they operate for sessions, as opposed to sort of seed grants, which is like, all right, we've seeded this, now we have to make it a success. No, we don't. We seed things, people working on them make a success, and if they're not able to do that, we just turn it off, and that's okay, no harm, no foul. So where are we? We've sort of spoken through all of the elements of this ERA budget and idea, given the reasoning, and now we're putting the budget up for discussion. And this is the part that I hope we've got lots of questions around, that can sort of talk more about the mechanism. We can talk more about the keystone projects and how that funding is going to be used and allocated, if there's still outstanding questions around that. But we've got to get on with this. We've got to start funding the things that need to be done. So for me, today is about making sure that, we clarify all of the questions, we make things as clear as possible. And then if there's sort of goodwill in terms of the answers that we're given, we put it up for a vote and we get the funding flowing to those keystone projects, and probably people on this call who I know are deeply invested in Pocket, wanted to succeed, can do things to actually help us achieve those ambitions. We just got to get the funds flowing to you guys to actually do that. So I'm going to stop there, just given it's probably taken a little bit longer than people might have expected. But I did just want to back over this stuff because it is really, really important to see that, yeah, there's lots of terminology and change, but like you can sum it up pretty quickly, which is like the best people working on the most important things with the funds they need to actually work, and not too much bureaucracy or overhead to do that. I actually think if we do those three things, which is what the ERA and the budget is trying to do, we're going to be okay. We're going to get to where we need to get to. So thanks for indulging me in sort of going through that. But Ming, I'll pass it back to you because, yeah, we just want to answer everyone's questions if there's anything still outstanding.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions or something they want to suggest or even bring up regarding any of these items, and not just the budget, but even the ERAs or any other programs, yeah, feel free to comment or to share either in text, or you can unmute yourself and ask live with your voice, beautiful voice, I'm sure, and we can address it on this call. Looks like CryptoCorn is typing.
Shout it out, Corn, if you can. Yeah, would be great if you can.
Yep.
Well, we got some typing. Anyone else have a question? Want to ask out loud or something that's not clear?
Yep, especially any of the line items on there as well. If anyone have any questions in terms of the amounts and such, feel free to ask here as well.
Yeah, I do actually have the budget, so let me go to that. But yeah, maybe this is where people's questions are. Is like what's all this stuff and why is that number so big? So happy to answer that as well if people want to get into it.
And in the meantime, I don't know, Jack, if do you have anything you wanted to add on top of what Ben has said as well, or what would we have you on as well?
No, Ben did a really good job covering everything. Yeah, I mean, if we need to wait for people to ask questions, we could maybe go over each of the budget items. Because I know there was maybe some uncertainty around what some of the items were.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we could go through each of them in turn, pretty high level. V1, protocol development and launch. There's a couple questions about this. People are wondering, well, don't we have P&I already working on this? Like, what's that all about? The majority of this budget is going towards recruiting fees. We are helping P&I to hire world-class protocol developers. It's vitally important that the protocol team is well-staffed with solid developers. So we're helping with that, and that's where some of that budget's going to. But then also we have recently announced we're hiring a product manager to oversee protocol development, and this will also require some money spent on recruiting fees. So that's where most of that line item is going to. It looks like we do have a question from CryptoCorn there.
Which I think actually leads into the next one pretty well. With Pocket has $1 billion of annual protocol revenue. So CryptoCorn's question is, can you give some clarity on how we'll get to $1 billion in annual revenue? What is the suggested timeline? Can you share roadmap metrics to get there? Love to have 1 billion annual avenue, but how do you realistically get to this number? Can you show any back-to-back napkin math and how to arrive there as part of the BHAGs and how we realistically get there? Any information will help educate the community that this is a realistic and obtainable goal.
Just coming off mute. I'll answer that sort of in the most basic term, which is the idea behind a big, hairy, audacious goal, is to set a vision or the outcome that you're driving towards. It's not actually to answer the question necessarily of how you get there. It's to give you a North Star around what it is that you're actually trying to do. I can't convince people personally that we're going to get to 1 billion in annual revenue, probably because people are going to see that in evidence, not my confidence for sort of getting us there. What I think from the ecosystem thesis exists is a clear vision from Dermot that there is an addressable market which goes to that size, if not necessarily today, at least in the vision of like a multi-chain future, which I think and hope everyone in the space actually believes in, because that's what we're all building towards. So yeah, I don't think it should be seen as like, here's how Pocket gets to $1 billion of annual protocol revenue with step A, B, and C. What it should be is that there's an addressable market to that size. We want to have as much of that addressable market as possible, and that we're doing the things that need to be done to move us in that direction. And I think we would all sort of agree that having more than one gateway is absolutely a key component of that. What comes next? One, I think that gets determined over the course of time. And two, it's not just on P&I to answer that question. P&F, sorry, to answer that question. It's on everyone in the community to answer that question. I think it's not this is the big bang sort of thing we do. This is, hey, how we get 1 billion of annual protocol revenue. It's going to be accumulation of everybody finding the things with a high return on investment that accretively move us in that direction of 1 billion. So yeah, I'm trying to not make that like a cop-out answer. I just would say maybe not entirely the right framing, and actually we don't have to define that right now. What we need to do is all agree that having a second gateway is a big unlock to that. I think that's important.
I'd like to add some more context there as well. We have had unofficial North Stars before at Pocket, and these have all been less productive than revenue in their own ways. So the first one was relays. Everyone was all rallying around how many relays are we doing? The road to 1 billion relays. And we started off a couple of years ago. We were really excited. I remember when we crossed the 10 million relay mark, and then a year or so later we got to 1 billion. And this made sense at the time as a North Star, because it was really about demonstrating traction and proving that there is some there's some product market fit. We actually can get people to use this thing. Yes, it was free, but people are still relying on it for their application. So even when it's free, the fact that they're using it is a good sign. So that's why relays was kind of settled on as a North Star. But then we got to the point where the tone started shifting, the perspective started shifting, and there was more desire to have paid relays as opposed to just counting the total amount. We then, for a period, had new chains as a North Star. There was there was a big push last year to list as many chains as possible. And to really target the long tail of chains, and in part because it helps to reinforce Pocket's value proposition as a standard that sits across any chain, and that that a developer can use to connect to any chain. And it had its own value as well, but similar to the relays, when taken to its extreme, really kind of amounted to adding more cost to the network in terms of adding more chains that need to be run without necessarily also adding more revenue for the protocol in tandem with that. So pivoting this or refining this North Star to being all about revenue and kind of aligning all of our strategies and projects around this, which we've already started to see with activating the burn, with this more recent inflation proposal, and with the intention to support multiple gateways going into Q3. These are examples of how clarifying that revenue as a North Star are really productive aligning mechanisms. As far as how feasible or realistic $1 billion is, just to indulge you on that one, if you go to Token Terminal, you'll see that Ethereum has the most revenue of any chain, and it does a little over $3 billion in revenue a year projected. So yeah, it is quite an ambitious goal, and it will probably take us a few years to get there. But as long as we're constantly making progress in that direction, then we know we're doing things right.
Awesome. Is there any other questions or anyone wanted to add to that as well?
It might be easy to chat. So just to double down those numbers, I mean, we're doing what, roughly 30K a month, about $1 million pocket. So actually, well, pocket's up today, which is great. So maybe 40K a month in revenue now. So that's what, 480K a year currently. And obviously those numbers don't go up because we're going to sell more relays and process more relays. 40K, 500K a month, 500K a year to 1 billion is, by my count, 2000x difference, which is obviously pretty significant. I mean, we all love hockey sticks and seeing numbers go up. It seems a little bit just kind of some more questions, or there's at least to understand the projections and how we 2000x our revenue from today to that to that bag. I appreciate it's a long-term goal. It's a kind of North Star we want to aim at, and we don't sort of necessarily have to get there and show we're going to get there in X amount of quarters. But I think there's sort of a subtle but important difference between having an unrealistic goal and having a goal saying, hey, we think we can get here because of X, Y, Z reasons. Here's our reasoning. Here's our projections. Here's numbers we think will make sense. And we think this is, defendable numbers we can use, as opposed to kind of having to sort of throwing sort of spaghetti at the wall in terms of goals and sort of hoping we get there by sort of magic and luck. I guess that's sort of the pushback. And I appreciate it's kind of hard to answer. But at the same time, it's probably worth having some kind of roadmap saying, look, this is what we think we can do for 3 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. So sort of have something sort of in the middle of actually having some kind of metrics or KPIs or numbers which people can sort of point to, as opposed to sort of just sort of high in the cloud thinking. I mean, it's difficult. What you can do would be great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we also need to take into context the fact that we're never going to get to that scale of revenue until V1 launches. The protocol as it stands is limited in scale. So I think I just did some quick back of the napkin math there, and it looks like to get to $1 billion in revenue, according to what some of the numbers you threw out there, we'd need to be doing trillions of relays. And we know that the protocol in V0 is limited to 10 billion. We do have ambitions of V1 being able to get to scale to this kind of scale. But really, until V1 is launched and until we kind of enter that kind of business as usual growth phase with multiple gateways and enter that new paradigm where we have like permissionless app staking, multiple gateways, each with their own strategies for growing relays, et cetera, we're not going to be able to say like what the the 1 to 100 timeline is, what the 1 to 100 strategy, or I guess 1 to 2000, according to your math there. So yeah, I guess to your point on goals and having realistic goals, I mean, right now we're just focused on growing relays, paid relays, by allowing multiple gateways to enter the ecosystem to create pluralistic sources of revenue rather than relying on P&I solely to drive revenue to the protocol. And then we can all rally around that, and the sort of landscape and the strategy and the timeline will all start to unfog as we make progress on all fronts.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, you guys know I've been very vocal about focus on demand and doing exactly everything you just said. I think is what we should spend 99% of our time doing. It's more just kind of a question of, have we sort of thought of a random goal, or we actually kind of had spent some time thinking about how we're going to get there sort of realistically? And it's a very hard question to answer. I appreciate. I think everything you said is like, the more we can push demand, the more we can increase relays, the more we increase our revenue, the more we sort of get that. We turn that 2,000 to 1,000 to 500 to 100. It's just sort of understanding the thinking behind that number, and it hasn't sort of just being sort of plucked out of the air. There is a sort of reasonable goal of getting there, and I'll sort of leave it at that. But I appreciate the answer, and I know it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
I might just jump in quickly because I appreciate the pushback. I think it is good. Two things I just want to call out around it is we don't have Dermot here, but he's actually working right now on a metrics document for PNF, which will answer a lot of this. So at least in terms of how we're actually tracking and measuring this and that element of this ambition, there should be like great clarity around that. So yeah, as I said, appreciate the pushback because I think we are lacking a little bit of context around how we're measuring it and that sort of thing. The other is like just to really make this point again, that PNF has a role as the credibly neutral steward, but it's not up to us to answer everything. And how do we get to 1 billion of annual protocol revenue? I think that's in a really big way, the question that gateway providers have to be answering, because their business is going to depend on that. So I think this is like the DAO sort of thing is, we all have to be comfortable that it's something that can be achieved. But I really do want to make the point again that like we believe in community. We think contributors can help answer these questions. We think gateway providers are responsible for driving that demand. So they're going to be building businesses that are centered or situated around answering this protocol revenue question because their cream comes on top of that. It's really really important that everyone sees that they have agency to answer these questions, and it's not PNF that's responsible for answering them. We're going to get there together.
And if PNF makes a statement, shouldn't PNF be able to defend that statement?
It's a goal. Yeah. So I know what you're saying.
I'm not trying to be difficult on the go, but like if you do make out very public statements like that, I feel like you should be able to sort of show the sort of working behind it, right? Of course, it's up to gateways to actually kind of do that all the hard work to actually bring in people. But if you guys decide what you want to put out publicly as your statements, surely you should be able to sort of back it up.
It's in the document that I shared with you already. The addressable market size is sort of there. Of course, there's an element of the growth component of the whole Web3 infrastructure space, but there's data behind that. You can have a look in that doc for sure.
Okay, thanks. And we'll also look forward to Dermot's document. The metrics actually be super interesting to see some numbers behind it, and sort of that's going to answer all what I'm asking right now. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Corn. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions they have on this one? Looks like Giro is just typing as well.
Well, if not, maybe like I liked where that was going with Jack, because I think going through each of the line items can probably give people a little bit more insight into the specific projects. Jack, if you're happy, maybe keep going down the list so you can illustrate for people what we're trying to deliver with this stuff.
Yep.
Sure. So yeah, I think the last one I touched on was the first line, protocol development. V1 economics and governance R&D. There's a couple of points on this. People asking, why are we going to pay $250K to the existing economists in our DAO to work on V1? And so I think it'd be helpful to give some more context on what we actually mean by R&D and what we mean by third-party experts. So this is a line item that basically, actually, let me take a step back. A couple months back, we started talking to the protocol team about V1 R&D and what the timeline is looking like, what the roadmap is looking like, and it became more apparent that they could use our support with working on specifically the utility spec. This is an area where, because it's basically the business model of the protocol, it's the marketplace that you're building, it helps to have the input of more than just developers and designing the architecture. And there were some very specific questions that they had around launching V1 and what should the different parameters be at Genesis. How do we make sure that the economy all functions smoothly, as well as some more like in the weeds questions about mechanisms and so on. And so, yeah, it came up that we could support with research for economics and governance of V1 specifically. And as far as third-party experts, we're talking about third-party firms like, as an example, Block Science, who have years of experience working on protocol design, protocol research, token economics, and so on. They invented CAD, which is a tool that I know some of the economists in our community have been experimenting with. They've worked with organizations, projects such as Filecoin and Graph on designing their economics and researching anything from monetary policy to the introduction of new mechanisms and so on. We have a decent relationship with the founder of Block Science and have got a bit more clarity from them on what that might look like, as well as numbers. As far as the budget for that line item, I would estimate that we would be spending no more than $100,000 to $150,000 on a project with a firm like Block Science, ultimately depending on the scope of work. So that kind of money would involve a full hands-on support with the design and research of the utility spec and the sort of governance of the parameters, like which parameters we're setting, how these are going to be governed, what the values are going to be at Genesis, et cetera, but obviously scaling down as far as spend, if it ends up being more focused work that we put them to task on. That would also obviously leave some room left over as a buffer, which we could be spending on other experts, researchers, which could include community members as well. And we have been speaking to some existing economists in our community about some of this work. So that's the second line item. Do we have any more questions as I've been talking?
Yeah, Gerard was asking with regards to the PNF hiring protocol engineers, is there a timeline in place when PNF will take complete engineering control of the protocol from PNI?
Yeah. There is not a timeline, mainly because it all comes down to the spending power of PNF and the DAO and Pocket in general. We're in a position where if we were to take on all of the salaries of the protocol engineering team, we would significantly slash our runway. PNI is a company that has equity that they can sell to raise funding, and so they have more access to capital. The foundation has pocket tokens, and we're all aware of the situation with pocket tokens. So really, as far as timeline for us taking full control of the protocol engineers and completely funding that team from the foundation or from the DAO, is really a question of the timeline for recovery of the price of Pocket and the spending power of the foundation and the DAO. See if there's any follow-up questions. Nope. Okay. Sounds good. So yeah, so that's protocol. That's helping make sure that V1 is the most successful new protocol launch ever. As far as the second BHAG, on $1 billion of annual protocol revenue, or let's just say growing annual protocol revenue, if we don't want to get too in the weeds with numbers, we have here as a Keystone project activating at least one new gateway. This is something that we've been noodling on for a couple of months, and we have more to come on this. There was supposed to be a forum post more recently, but it got pushed back by some of the work on inflation and such, because those all became very important issues to the community. But as far as gateways, ultimately these gateways are going to be generating revenue when they launch. So it's not they're not projects that need to be fully funded, although they could use some help with bootstrapping, and we're talking to prospective gateway operators about this. What this line item is for is really just supplementary, any kind of supplementary funds that might be required, whether it's help with paying a lawyer to draft contracts. We also are considering having contracts between the foundation and the gateways to keep them accountable and help to govern the app stakes that are being distributed. And then there might be like bounties to help with marketing or different viral campaigns and so on. So just there's a miscellaneous bucket for helping the gateways. As far as brand, these different marketing ones, they are zero because they've already been budgeted for by the foundation. The foundation is already committed to paying those. We've got someone typing. Okay, Ian.
Ian is, yep.
Okay. I'll wait for this question, and then Ben, you've been leading the DNA work with Dermot, so I'll let you speak to that, and then I'll take on creds.
Well, let's just keep going. And if he wants, so I'll keep typing. Both are cool. But yeah, I think we just keep going, and we'll stop in when we need.
So Ian commented with someone minding going back over some of the community contribution incentives, the ILI
Definitely
5.
Yeah,
idea for
I'll go over that. Maybe Jack, you can just talk to marketing quickly, because it's not actually an expense to the DAO, so you can maybe tell people where that's at and what PNF's investing in.
Yeah, I touched on that briefly just now. Those are on the budget for PNF already, so we don't need to ask the DAO for. We don't need any funding from the DAO to cover those. We've already committed to those expenditures.
Cool. And could you maybe just give an update on those? I think.
Okay.
A couple of questions. Yeah. What is it? Where are we at with that stuff? Yeah.
Sure. So we're already working with a PR firm. We've for the last couple of weeks been onboarding with them, working through some narrative strategy, which is pretty much close to being done. And we've already started submitting speaker applications and getting all the press kits ready and everything. And we're preparing a press release or press strategy for revenue. There's basically a bunch of interrelated developments that make for a really compelling story, i.e. Revenue that we've just activated, the fact that it's at a pretty good level as a baseline, the fact that we're going to be having multiple gateways, the fact that, I guess, subject to voting in the DAO, if the inflation proposal passes, this will be a related news item, which all comes together to make for a compelling story about Pocket becoming more sustainable, Pocket driving revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the first things that we're working with the PR firm on. So that's the PR. And then head of marketing, we have confirmed that we're hiring a head of marketing. We have made an offer and they have accepted, and they're going to be starting the first week of July. So that's really exciting. They've got some commitments that they need to see through, but they're starting full time in July, and they're already getting started reading through things and getting up to speed on everything. So we're really excited about that.
Nice one, thank you. I'll cover this next ambition, has the healthiest culture and governance of any DAO. And I think you've seen already some of the things earlier on around like the pitfalls or common challenges that DAOs are facing. I just really want to sort of like explain what we mean by culture and governance, because culture, people tend to think is like kumbaya shit or like going woke or whatever, and governance people think is like some sort of positioning in group, out group sort of like question. We really have to shed those perspectives on what culture and governance are. Governance is how an organisation operates, it's how it makes decisions, it's how it allocates resources. It's basically how we get ourselves towards these ambitions. So it is like really, really critical that that works as effectively as possible. And sometimes that's going to be about how we make big decisions. Most of the time, it's going to be about how we delegate to people to actually do stuff and don't sit around in sort of like a jerk-off contest, sort of making decisions through forum posts and that sort of thing. So it is really, really important that we have really strong governance, but I just want people to understand that that's the organisation. That's what we're working within, and we should all be figuring out how we make that work for us. The culture part is basically how we work. It's not about what we can say, it's about how we communicate so we can all be working together in the most effective way possible. So all this sort of stuff here, really want to make the point, it's like about how we have large decentralized project with lots of contributions, can do that effectively without driving each other crazy. So that's the main thing that we're sort of trying to do here. So DNA is really about why it's attractive to work to Pocket and what it would be like for people to onboard into our project. It's really critical to get new talent in, to have really strong clarity around that. So that expense is a little bit about how we create some mechanisms to do that. The creds is the next version of our governance. Today, I think it's very binary in terms of like our governance structure. You're either a voter or you're not a voter. We think the future of creds, or the future of the trophy system, is to let people start voting earlier, but maybe with not the same weighting as people that have been here for longer or are more knowledgeable. We think there's lots of ways we could maybe go from 50 voters to 100 voters almost overnight by giving people different percentage voting and things like that. So that's a big part of this step for us. And then sockets is basically these seed grants for people to start working on things that they help achieve our ambitions. And to do that without having to go through a proposal process. So the idea for a socket would be, I think I can influence protocol revenue by doing some activity, starting my own gateway or whatever, you can spin up overnight a $3,000 grant towards actually doing that, and then after a month, everyone will be looking over your shoulder to see, are you actually delivering stuff, or are you sort of planning and still discussing and figuring out, because if it is, the funds will get switched off. So I think, the key mechanisms for us are sockets as a way for people to start getting active and driving impact, driving results without having to do proposals. And then the POPs is basically going to be the big additional sort of projects or things that need to be done. They just need to be decentralized in terms of how that work is allocated. One thing I think is happening with P&I right now is they're doing a great job of decentralizing the project in some ways. Yep. It also puts them in the position, though, of being in charge of permissioning, to say it less effectively, perhaps. They are probably being kingmakers in a way of who can do what. That's untenable. We're a decentralized project. It should be open. It should be credibly neutral. We know there's going to be big things that need to be done, and those POPs, those open priorities, are going to enable us to do that. That's really coming more from our take as opposed to these keystone projects here. But for sockets, we're saying we want people to be able to plug in and out quickly to try and experiment and spin things up. We need to have some budget behind it to do that. Ian, does that answer it okay? Still not sure it was like an explain it like I'm five version. I'm not very good at those because I'm too verbose, but is it clear to you what sockets are and what these open priorities are?
What's not clear to me is like the burden of proof to apply or to show credibility that you're actually moving towards something. And really, I'm still unclear as to the difference between a POP and a socket. Does a socket mean that somebody can just apply for a grant and they don't really need any credibility? They can just get paid for a month and then start chipping away? Why I've noticed that, one POP has opened up already, and it's something I'm fully capable of doing, but it seems to be a bidding process, and I'm not like keen to get involved in any kind of bidding process. So I'm just curious about so POP seems to be a bid and socket seems to be a grant, and I just want to understand how that works.
Sure. So thanks for that. Gives a chance to touch on some really important things. The first is that sockets are what I would call lightly permissioned. If you are already a contributor in some form, like doing bounties, or you're a DAO voter who's demonstrated their reputation by going through that process, or perhaps do some new things that we might introduce, like have like an NFT or the cred understands our DNA, our vision, then you're basically vouched in already. It is a low reputation system, and you put your reputation on the line when you say you want to open a socket, because you either deliver or it's gone. That's sort of the system. I call it light permissioning, but basically we want people like you and other trusted sources in the community to just not be encumbered by having to demonstrate your value over and over again. You demonstrate your value by delivering impact against those sockets. That's the direction we're moving in now. This might all evolve. We're going to make it capture resistant, so we don't have people coming off the street trying to get sockets. But the idea is that the people we've got in our community are mostly already with enough context to be able to do stuff. We don't need to be adding layers of bureaucracy on top for them to do that. And then when it comes to like the POPs, sometimes I think they're going to be more of this RFP submission process. Sometimes it might be a little bit different. For now, probably the ones that you will see are slightly more of a open submission process. I would just really make the point that I don't think it's like a bidding process as such. When we spoke about this, and the reason we didn't call them RFPs is because we want the best people working on them. Yeah, we want the best submissions. It's not a race to the bottom. Yep, we don't want people to be doing things and getting squeezed to sort of do that. But we also understand people have different tolerances around what they might like to do. So if it's not a process you're comfortable with, that's fine. We think there's probably ways you can contribute through sockets, and we can talk offline about that too.
That was an excellent answer. That answered like all of my questions about that. Thanks.
Thank you for the awesome question.
And yeah, just to add some more context on the sockets, I think it might be helpful to just share some examples of sockets that have already been opened. So Pocket News has been funded by a socket now for the last few months. So the work that Pocket News is doing, including on the official Twitter account, is socket funded. Also, H5 Law has been working on an IBC integration for V1. That is socket funded. He came along and was like, "Hey guys, I'm really interested in this IBC stuff. I know a lot of people care a lot about it. I think I could get started on it, but it's a bit experimental." That's the perfect kind of contribution for a socket. So he's plugged into that as well. So yeah, those are some examples, and I expect like the IBC integration is one that will eventually wrap up once that work is done. Pocket News is one that's going to be ongoing, and so yeah, that's another a good example there of how sockets for specific contributions are not necessarily time limited. It really all depends on the nature of the contribution, and someone can come along, open a socket to do one thing, wrap that project up, and then open another one after. And the more they're contributing, the more reputation they're building, and the easier it's going to be to get larger amounts of funding available to deliver on different things.
Thanks, Jack. And it actually raises something which I should have shared. But you give me a prompt to sort of share it now. One of the reasons we wanted to create this mechanism, is it just removes the barrier to sort of innovation. And I actually think if someone had come into the forum and said, "Hey, I'm going to run an alternative social media channel which just focuses on the community, and I'm going to communicate all the stuff through that," a lot of people would sort of say that's a waste of time, or we've already got the main Pocket channel, or blah, blah, blah. But Pocket News, I think, has been able to carve out a niche which is really valuable to everyone in the community and increasingly outside of the community as well. So the thing that we want to do is, unlock people from those debates, but also, like, it's not the end state. I think if Pocket News now came and did a proposal, they've accumulated the evidence, of their work, and that can be valuable, and the ROI, and can make like a pretty smooth proposal to the DAO now to be funded to keep their work going. So we actually think sockets are like the way to get past the debate, move from this idea of confidence to demonstrating evidence instead. But yeah, these are things where I think people will plug in, demonstrate value, hopefully grow their contributions, and then be able to go back to the DAO and have a lot less contentious debates around whether this is going to be valuable or not, because we've got evidence rather than like an ideas contest. So I think this is going to be like the main unlock from this, giving people a chance to demonstrate, and making the governance process a lot easier when people do need to make proposals to get more funding.
Yeah, and to tie this back to the PEP-60 ERA's budget proposal, the 80% of future DAO revenue that is being carved out in that proposal would be for sockets and POPs, specifically sockets and POPs that tie into the BHAG goals that we've outlined. So the goal there being to make sure that the majority of work that is being funded in the DAO is all aligned in the direction of these goals, and maximize the impact of the DAO. So the last goal is pretty straightforward. We've got Wrap Pocket and we've got exchange listings. The exchange listing question has been answered pretty well in the forum, so I'm not really going to speak to that. I would, if you're wondering, I would recommend going to the thread. Nelson has pretty much answered that there. With Rat Pocket, I can give a bit of context there. So Rat Pocket is already underway as far as development. We are working with a crypto native dev shop called Raid Guild. And the budget for that, if memory serves correctly, was about just shy of 50K, so below 50K. And this is for front end, back end, kind of full stack development, including design. So we've already seen some UIs for the bridge. And it's going pretty smoothly. They're already kind of working with testnet and so on. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to get a demo of things very shortly. So that's the development and design of Rat Pocket. But there's also going to be there's legal as well. There's audits for when Raid Guild have finished their work. So that's where the rest of the budget comes in. So basically, in other words, we have 150K allocated there to Rat Pocket, not including the liquidity line item. And a third of that is already committed. And the remaining 2/3 would be for everything else that's required to prepare for the launch of Rat Pocket.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions or thoughts they want to add regarding that? Rat Pocket especially. And I know that there was questions too before where what chain Rat Pocket is going to be on. Do we want to confirm that as well, Jack? Or
I would say let's keep this discussion focused on the budget stuff. And then, yeah, we're going to have more developments to share in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So just to Corn's question there, that is the timeline we're working towards right now. In terms of the development work of Rat Pocket, there's a few other questions that Jack was alluding to there in terms of legal advice around it, in terms of completing an audit of the work that's been completed. But yeah, at least from a development perspective, that's where we want to be, aiming for sort of that date into August.
in case anyone's wondering, that would be an expectation of for the end of August, is what was suggested. So, all right, any other questions on this regarding the Rat Pocket budgets? All right. If not, I think we are good. It's been an awesome call. A lot of questions. Hopefully we have addressed and answered. And yeah, if there's anything else, feel free to, of course, contact and reach out, especially on the forum. And then we can always get some additional discussion going there as well, in terms of getting into details if you need to. So yeah, anything else? Yep. Last things you guys want to add?
Just one last thing I want to add is yeah, thanks for setting this call up and for people here sort of asking questions. You know, a lot of these mechanisms are new, sockets and pops and errors and all of this sort of stuff. We're far from infallible, so your questions, your feedback are like important to helping us iterate on those and make them a success. So really do appreciate getting pushed on things. Perhaps our assumptions or our understanding is not the same of other people in the community. That's a really important part for us as PNF is to make sure we got strong feedback and information coming to us around how we can be better. And yeah, I'd just say, you know, keep it going, even though we're going to put the ERA budget up for voting pretty much after we jump off this call. Yeah, we really want to make sure that we continue to educate around these activities, that you keep us accountable to delivering to those line items. So if there's other stuff that isn't covered, just because we put it up for a vote doesn't mean the conversation ends. So hopefully, yeah, we get a chance to speak to you more and demonstrate that, yeah, this is all good stuff and we're able to execute on it. Thanks, Ming.
Perfect. All right, with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up this call. Thanks again for everyone for joining the town hall, and hopefully this will give you a lot of good insight into what this is all about. So thank you all for joining. Take care.
Yeah. For now.
Bye-bye.